Hey everyone, I figured that I would try and show off a deck that I used to hit infinite both last season and this season, and hopefully see if it could help some people. There are a few substitutions that I could potentially show, but for now I'm just going to show this exact deck as is. To start off this match, I faced this guy multiple times. He plays Hobgoblin, Green Goblin, and Doc Ock and Galactus. But I don't think he has any opportunity to play Galactus this game, so I'm already prepared for the Hob and Green Goblin. I don't really block off any of my lanes. Instead, I just use Dracula to counteract because of how high power he is. And he is probably the one card in the deck that cannot be substituted. Swordmaster might be able to for Strong Guy. I need to do a little bit more testing. Let me know if anyone will want a video showing like more substitutions. Just maybe, I don't want to say more beginner friendly because Modoc obviously was a season pass card, but more friendly than, Gambit or Swordmaster's Inconsistency, etc. I did have a few pop ups, some dumbass security ones, but I figured these matches were so great that I was going to leave them in because these are a perfect example of, snapping when you should, when you shouldn't, what you should do with specific areas. Things like that, pretty much. So he drops the goblin, and I'm not particularly worried. Granted, I don't have anything super high cost or super high power there, so it won't counteract it like a Dracula would. But I figure that with the Sunspot absorbing, plus he Green Goblin's probably the worst lane to Green Goblin, that it shouldn't be a terrible idea. The snap is obviously probably a good idea for me because that hood is going to do nothing for the Dracula. I could have Modoc'd here, but I decided to Lady Sif and Colleen because it would split things up so that the Apocalypse would have more power going into the Dracula. Now, this turn is a bit tricky because there would be a chance normally of the swarm going into Dracula, and that's why I like to be able to place Colleen or Modoc on turn 5. Ideally, Colleen, so that you can get that Lady Sif Colleen combo of Apocalypse coming back and then coming back again after Modoc. So if that's in your starting hand, that is almost snap worthy. I would say those two cards plus a pop. Yeah, whoa, forgot the retreat. Plus Apocalypse, Dracula, Morbius within the first 2 or 3 turns would be snap worthy. That was an obvious retreat. I assume he's one of the few people that recognized, what Dracula can do. I feel like a lot of people forget about him. Like they know what he does, but they kind of just forget that he's on the board at times under pressure, if the match is very close. This location is lovely to show off because it can definitely leave you with a very screwed up hand. My hand right now isn't perfect, but it could be worse. So I decided to stick through, not snap yet, but stick through for now. And this is where I decide Swordmaster, and I hope he doesn't hit anything important. So ideally not Modoc or Shang. And this is where the inconsistency comes in. But I figure it's worth it. And I kind of check his deck to see how much he has just so I remember. Unfortunately, that discards the Shang, but then his Moon Knight discards my Apocalypse and his Colleen, which kind of makes it worth it. And then he discards his Modoc, which has got him down to 1 card. So, I snapped too late. What I would have done is played some cards into Cloning Vat so that it powered up. So that it gave me more Swarm on the board and gave me another Wolverine, but that snap was too late in the game. I don't know if I would have snapped earlier necessarily. Maybe if I would have been paying a little more attention to how many cards he had in his hands, then potentially. But the fact that Moon Knight discarded his Modoc was huge. So I don't know what anyone would have really done in that situation. With Quinja, I thought it was Thanos, which would have been a hard matchup only because of Leech. Everything else doesn't really bother. And I think my only loss in this game is from Leech, I'm pretty sure, which I didn't play that match well. Leech is very hit or miss. You know, he can obviously mess you up really bad, or he just he kind of hurts a little bit, but he doesn't entirely damage your strategy. Now I knew when I didn't skip, there was a high chance of having armor in this meta, especially with Quinjet, Stone, Sunspot. So I just kind of accepted the fact that that right lane was going to get armored. I had a good enough hand to not worry, that I was pretty confident. Snapworthy, not enough in his deck to let me know. But then again, he didn't really play any cards that indicated his Quinjet, benefited them at all because he hasn't gained any cards in his hand. And he only has 2 cards on the board. So the Swordmaster unfortunately discards the Modoc, but it is what it is. I wouldn't have wanted a Modoc final turn anyways. And at this point, I decide to let his Devil Dino kind of stick in the mid area because Apocalypse is going to overpower Devil Dino mixed with a Swarm. So like I said, this wasn't, I'm not going to say an easy one, but that also screwed over Arrow. So it was a easier one that could have been 8 cubes, but 4 cubes would definitely have been the route that I took because if something else happened, 8 cubes is not worth that loss. And then for that Leech match I was talking about, he was glitched last turn, which I don't really know if it would have changed the outcome of the game. Up there, I'm just checking to make sure that my recording is still going, but I didn't want to remove anything just because of how awesome these matches are, in my opinion, and how helpful. I've also faced this guy before a lot, but I didn't really remember what he was running, so I was just checking Thanos because I thought it was Thanos or Galactus. This first location is kind of awkward because you don't want to pull Modoc if you have a hand that you need things in. So I usually don't recommend putting things in there unless you have Modoc, Morbius, Dracula in your hand, or at least Morbius and Dracula. You definitely don't want Modoc to be hitting Morbius or Dracula. So right now, I suppose anything would have been okay. That Devil Dino was the end of it. I snapped way, way too late. But then again, I should have figured that there is chance in this game. So had I snapped, he probably wouldn't have wanted to go for more than the original 2 cubes. Could be wrong, but that Devil Dino definitely messed him up. I was gonna Wolverine mid, but didn't really matter because I didn't have a full idea of what I was doing yet. But then again, it's free retreat. Most of these people I had faced before I hit Infinite and after because I started season reset at like 70 some since I got so high last season. This is a pretty solid opening hand. Morbius and Dracula are almost snap worthy. I would say Morbius, Dracula, Apocalypse, and maybe Lady Sif are ideal because then Leech won't really do much unless he gets out on turn 4. If he gets out on turn 5, then at worst he'll, hit your Modoc, Shang, stuff that isn't as valuable as Dracula or Apocalypse or really anything along those lines. Morbius, I guess, would be the only 3 that I think you really would be snap worthy. I do believe I lose this match because Leech hits me off guard, and he also, like I said, he glitches, which is really weird. I could be missing something, so let me know if I am, but I'm pretty sure it's a glitch. I'm pretty sure once he leeches your hand, it's supposed to stay leeched until the game ends. So when I'm thinking right here, I'm thinking, okay, well, there's not much I can do because of leech, right? But then next turn ends up just giving me all the abilities back, kind of. And this is, I don't really know if I could have necessarily won this. With Modoc, I would have gotten 2, 4, 6, 8. So I would have gotten 8 on the Morbius lane. The problem was that I didn't split my Dracula and my Morbius. Had I split those two, I would have a higher chance of winning. But like I said, if you look at all those cards, I mean, I didn't really expect for Leech to just kind of either break or me not knowing how it works. In this scenario, I feel like I was double checking there to see if something was broken. But in this scenario, I was kind of thinking through, and I should have Draculaed probably mid, and then Modoc to right had I known this was going to happen, but definitely Draculaed separate because Morbius and Dracula are two different win conditions, and usually Morbius won't really get Enchantress, and if he does, that's a 4 commitment from your opponent, so it's definitely worth the risk, in my opinion. This pulls a She-Hulk and an Infinite, which messes me up the whole game. Had Dracula been in the left lane, I believe I would have won. Well, no, maybe not. Had Morbius, no. I think that was still a loss, but regardless of if they were split or not. But in most scenarios, I would say do split them up as much as possible because Dracula can really, really damage Shuri decks. If you manage to hit Apocalypse to 30, 40 power, then it equals out sometimes to, Shuri She-Hulks. Now, this first location is a perfect example of Apocalypse hitting some wild numbers. And with my starting hand, I would almost snap. I don't know what he's running. That's the only reason why I didn't. But Morbius 2 lanes, Dracula 2 lanes, Modoc 2 lanes. If I didn't get leeched, even if I did on turn 5, it would only hurt my Modoc, and maybe 1 or 2 more cards. But Dracula and Morbius on the board twice enough alone is almost a free one, especially if you know what your opponent's playing. And as you see, I snapped because I saw that. I saw that there were only 2 Patriots on board, and it will not overpower 2 Draculas and 2 Morbiuses because, they both get powered up as Apocalypse gets discarded. And this is where I'm kind of thinking, do I want to Modoc this turn or Colleen? In this scenario, I figured I would Modoc because he would go to 2 different areas. Where if I Colleened, it would have hit Swarm twice, and I would have had more Swarm in my hand. So I wouldn't have drawn Chavez. I mean, it might have equaled out, but it ended up working out. That math I wasn't fully sure on. I just know that Modoc 2 lanes is really fun because it powers up, that's a 12 Apocalypse, and then that's going to be what, a 14, something like that. Let's see. Or 16. A 16 Apocalypse plus 2 Dracula is going to be a 20, and then 24 Apocalypse, 20 in one lane, 24 in the other, plus, the Morbius 2 discards. So this is a solid win against Shuri if you play your cards right. Red Skull can help and hurt if he has the +2. So if he has his ongoing, then Red Skull can actually really help you in this scenario. So I wouldn't say this is a hard counter to Shuri by any means, but if played right, it can definitely stand up to. I've beat a lot of Shuri matchups with this. I would say Leech is really the only hardcore counter to this deck. And like I said, Shuri is not perfect, but enough to where you can stay in for a bit longer than usual. I would say 2 cubes max, unless you're really confident. I like to base off of like an 80% win rate and kind of go from there, or an 80% what you think would be, are you going to win this? Is there an 80% chance that you're going to win this from your eyes? Because if there's not, once you hit infinite, then it's just not worth losing that cubes or right before you hit infinite. At this point, if I saw this board and I was the other player, I would retreat 100%. There is nothing in my mind that I can think of right now, even Doctor Doom, anything, that could win this. She-Hulk, Infinite, I don't even think would win it. I mean, I know he played something, but there is nothing. So this was a free 8 cubes, and there's a lot of scenarios where, like I was saying, you can pull 8 cubes from this if you have a good enough hand and do this right. It's an amazing deck. If you need any more tips or want me to show some substitutions, let me know, and I can post another video. Other than that, that should be all. Hopefully you enjoyed and hopefully it helps. Have a great rest of your day. All right. Peace.